All right, let's relax and be informal and stuff here. So I'm going to sit down and sip coffee and chat with you. So we're going to do a couple things today. First, I'm going to run through some information about how this works and how we got this stuff historically. And Dr. Cook is going to sort of keep the screen going to the place it's supposed to be. You can also download this, and if you go to this website, johnmortensen.com, please notice the correct Danish spelling of Mortensen, which is S-E-N, not the corrupted Swedish spelling of S-O-N. And you will get to this site, and you will see me looking tortured and artistic and thoughtful. And just below that, there is this link to Oracle Chamber Music Festival Masterclass Notes. And you get, this will work on mobile, and it will work on your laptop or whatever. So I'm gonna work from this. And it will be on the screen, but you also can just have it if you want it. If you do want to keep it, go ahead and take it today. I probably won't leave that link right up in that spot very long. So,
by the way, our Wi-Fi password is Oracle Piano. If anyone wants to get on the Wi-Fi for Orca, it's Oracle Piano.
There we go. I'm going to run through this rather quickly, and because it's a lot, and I don't want to get bogged down. So, make a note of questions you might have. It does take a while to internalize all this stuff, so don't feel bad if it just feels overwhelming. So this first example right here, this is the first page. Excuse me, the first page of Francesco Durante's treatise. Durante was the most important teacher in Naples. There were 4 conservatories in Naples that were extremely influential for the next couple hundred years, and he was the dude. And this is the first page of what he would teach. And as you can see, it's a scale going up and down in G major, and then another one in G minor, and there's some little numbers. And those numbers are figures which tell you what intervals go with these bass notes. And this pattern is known as rule of the octave, regole dell'ottava. And rule of the octave is a system of harmonization for a scale in the bass. And it is the most basic, generally useful, generic sound there could ever be. So I'll play rule of the octave, and I'll refer to it as RO, because we talk about it so much. So RO means rule of the octave. So here's rule of the octave. About that is just how normal it sounds. It sounds like really, really regular classical music. And that's because everyone who wrote regular classical music was trained in this, and this became their basic vocabulary. This is just like musical small talk that everyone knows how to do. Hey, how's it going? Well, it's cool here in Oracle. It's nice that the sky is blue. Think it'll rain later? I don't know, might not. Yeah, you've covered all your bases there. That kind of language we all have, and you almost don't even notice it because it's so normal. And that's what rule of the octave is. It's just this normal sounding, all-purpose classical language in major and minor. So this is the first thing they had to learn at the keyboard, and they would play the bass in the left hand, and they would play chords in the right hand. And you have to learn this beginning in any position of the right hand chord. So in G major, I need to be able to start with G or B or D at the top of the right hand chord in the soprano, and then play without creating parallel fifths and octaves with the bass, so that the outer voices have correct voice leading. I don't really worry about the inner voices. You can't hear them on the keyboard anyway. All you can hear is a chunk of sonority, and so they totally didn't care if the alto sort of did something parallelish with the bass. They totally didn't care. Generally, the way they would learn to move avoided that anyway, and so they never had to do music papers with parallel things from the professor in red ink. Idiot, you wrote parallel fifths. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. And why didn't they play parallel fifths? Because they didn't practice parallel fifths. So the next example is the same thing in modern notation, so it's easier to read and it's realized in the upper staff. And this, of course, begins in first position in both major and minor. So I've got G on the soprano note. Now, of course, as I start here, I cannot move the soprano note to A because that would be parallel with the bass. So I have to duck some other direction and avoid all that. When I teach this, I did a class in this at my college this fall, and I said, over the summer, guys, you all are going to learn rule of the octave in every key up to 3 sharps and flats. Maybe I had them do 4. Major and minor, in every position, starting. No mistakes, and I want a video with a metronome clicking at 80 beats per minute, no mistakes, the entire thing, or you can't come to the first day of class. Okay? And it worked. It totally worked. They had a couple months and they could practice, but they could absolutely do it. And when you put that much time into it, it just becomes really easy. So that's the level of investment that RO takes to be any good at it. And I tell anyone who's serious, look, just do all 24 keys. Just learn it. Just start and just learn every key. Because if you have a job like mine, I walk out and I go, hi, people of Oracle. Will someone choose a major or minor key? And what is some smart aleck going to do to me? What do you think they're going to do to me? Of course. Of course. And so I practice in those keys all the time. You know, if someone wants something in E flat minor. I was at my home institution and I was playing something for a concert with all of the faculty on stage and all the students. And I asked my boss, my department chair, would you please choose a key? And of course, we're friends and she loves to try to get my goat, so she's like, E flat minor. And what do the students do? Ooh. But there are no secret keys. They're all in the public domain. You can know what they are and go study them, right? There's no like platform 9 3/4 that people don't know about. So why not just do them, and then you're bulletproof. So also then it makes me look really good because the students wonder if I can survive, and of course I can. So it helps me in my life. All right, this next one right here, you'll notice it's only ascending, but it's in 3 voices instead of these thicker chunks. And here on the keyboard, you'll notice sometimes the upper part will have 3 notes. Maybe I did them all in 3. Yeah, I did them all in 3. But sometimes there will be 2, sometimes there'll be 4 in the right hand. And again, they didn't really care. But on when you do it in 3 voices like this, it's a much more transparent texture, and it's great for strings. So string players, if you had this, and you said, well, I got to improvise on this thing, what would I do? Well, you could, one, you would probably have to re-space some of these harmonies to fit the limitations of strings. So instead of this spacing for G major, you might do the open spacing of this. Okay? Absolutely. Okay? And now from here, if I have that kind of 5th and 6th spacing that makes a hand shaped like that, that's not that bad, I could go here. For the next one, I might, cello would be hard. I don't know if that's possible, or if we have to do this. But either way, we could do it. There would be some way a cellist could figure out where you could just go broom, 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 triple stops all the way up the street. And then you could go, okay, now that I know that, I could make a piece of music out of that. Etc. Hey, I'm improvising in 9/8 time. So this kind of stuff is very adaptable to strings. And I would really encourage someone who wants to improvise on strings to learn rule of the octave adapted to their own instrument. I think that you're going to run into limitations with the crazy flat keys. But just start with G major and see what you can do. Or in cello, C major, so you can have that wonderful low C. Okay, so after they learned rule of the octave, and they know what sonority goes with every scale degree, now we start to play Partimento. And so here is Partimento number 1 by Giovanni Furno. And notice there are no chords, no numbers, no nothing. And you're supposed to know what harmony goes with this. And the way you do it is you say, okay, this exercise, this Partimento, is only based on rule of the octave. It's the only thing I have to know. I don't have to know anything about music, and I can do this with rule of the octave. So what do? I think through what every scale degree is in the bass, and what sonority or what intervals that scale degree is going to take. And that's really all I have to do, and just avoid ugly voice leading problems. So let me play this. Realize it for you. And it's interesting to me that, you know, the first exercise already is not just in stepwise motion. That's just a preparatory exercise. As soon as you get into Partimento, now it's going to leap, so you have to think harder about what everything is. So, again, notice the very generic sound. This could be the accompaniment to an aria or, you know, some opera thing. Did you know Zigeunerweisen is entirely rule of the octave, the accompaniment? It's entirely rule of the octave. There's no other techniques involved harmonically. I was listening to it in Lithuania. I went to a student concert, and I just started cracking up in the back row. And I'm like, this is just rule of the octave. Then the next exercise is just the same thing, but in minor. All I have to know is rule of the octave in B minor. Etc., etc. I won't play the whole thing. Usually I make students play these, then I make them transpose them without writing it out. And then we do a thing called stylization, where we create some kind of interesting piece of music only using this information. So, for example, there's a style in the harpsichord where you arpeggiate everything. Or I can make a figuration prelude. Etc. Okay? Only using the information that is right there in front of you. So, and this is really very basic. The next thing that they would learn is cadences, and I've only put the illustration of the double cadence. There are three types: simple, compound, and double. Simple is just 5/1. Double, or compound is the middle one. Compound has a suspension. And then the big one here has dum, 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 which is what you're seeing. You also have to learn these in every position of the upper voices. So if you keep moving the upper voices to different places in the chord, you have to know all of those. And then you have to recognize when each one is called for in a Partimento. So that's the next Partimento in Furno. Partimento for cadences. And of course, this has been edited to give you help. When there's only one beat, it's a simple cadence, because that's all you have time for. Chunk, chunk. When you have two beats on scale degree 5, you have time for the compound. You can suspend and resolve. And of course, the big honkin' double cadence always requires a whole note. So as you go through Partimento, you start recognizing these whole notes on scale degree 5, and you're like, this is a double cadence. Anybody can see that. And of course, you now know all these different ways to play a double cadence. There's one treatise by this monk, his name was Spiritionis, and it starts with 72 different double cadences. They're all filled with 16th notes and cool trills and ornaments, and he's like, memorize these 72 cadences and come to your lesson next week. So, then we move on, the partimento for modulation, and I won't be able to explain everything about this because it gets pretty deep, but the idea is that sometimes when we change key, it shows up in the bass, and you get a chromatic note in the bass, but sometimes not. So if I'm in G, and I'm going to modulate to E minor, the bass might not show me that, right? That D sharp might be somewhere else in an upper voice. So by the way the bass moves, we are tipped off that a cadence is taking place, even if there's no accidentals to help. And normally that is the drop of a fifth on a strong beat. When the bass drops a fifth or goes up a fourth, that is a cadence if it lands on a strong beat. Okay? And so this exercise, you're supposed to see where you're going with all these different key areas. Okay? Then they move on to actual bass motions. And here the bass motion is down a third, up a second, which you can see right here. Down a third, up a second takes a standard harmonization. If you don't do this harmonization, it will not sound like Baroque music. It will be wrong. Okay, it will not be in the style. So there are very specific things you have to obey to stay within the style. And in this case, the upper note takes what we call a chord of the fifth, or which we just think of as a triad, and the lower note takes a chord of the sixth, or a 6/5. So let me play some of these for you. Any major or minor key, please.
F sharp minor.
Yeah. Right, sure. So the bass is going to do this. And I'll do the leading tone there to finish out. So the first note, this is chord of the fifth. And the second note, I could do just chord of the sixth and continue like that. If I want to return immediately, I can do that, or I can do Okay, so that's the simplest one. The cooler one is a 6/5. So nice. Nice. And then there are other options where you can start suspending more things. Once you understand the guts of it, the structure, you can start putting different kinds of frosting and sprinkles on. Like, I love this. I'm suspending the tenor. And that was a double cadence, because I know my stuff. Okay, so this is the solution to these bass motions, and of course there are thousands of ways you can then decorate this. You can put scales on it, you can do repeated notes and crazy dotted rhythms. It's really endless once you understand the structural stuff. Like this building is made of bricks and stuff in the shape of a box, and we have these beams and the roof. Good. Now we can make it into a disco, or we could make it into a church, or we have a concert hall, or we could make it into a dentist office, for crying out loud. You know, really, it doesn't matter. Once the structure is in place, you can do almost anything with it. And then this partimento, what you have to do, again, it's been noted by the editor, that's where the bass motion goes, these little bent arrow thingies. What do we do with the rest of this? Well, that's going to be rule of the octave through there. We already know about rule of the octave. That puppy right there is a cadence. Look at that. Okay? and then rule of the octave, and then the special bass motion, blah, 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 blah. There is a super obvious modulation. It's going to initiate a modulation, but it's not the cadence. The cadence happens right here, the drop of the bass, okay? And then more of the bass motion and so on. So a big part of the job of Parlamento is going through and recognizing what's actually going on. It's not whatever you want or you think sounds cool, it's the rules. Improv is just lousy, it's stanky with rules, okay? Next, I'm just going to jump ahead. This is Parlamento number 10, and the purpose of this is to haunt your dreams. Okay, just look how long this thing is. Just look at that. Oh my word. So in our class that we did, it took 10 weeks to get to the point where they could handle this, and they totally could handle it. It was great. It was super fun. If we have time, I'll put up a video of one of them doing this. So now here, these are the steps. I like to use the phrase recognize, realize, stylize. When we recognize in this slide, I'm finding all the cadences based on how the bass is moving. So when the bass drops a fifth or goes up a fourth on a strong beat, that's a cadence. And the note it arrives on tells me the tonality. You know, we're going to be in that key. So I recognize all of the cadences, and then from there I go backward and say, well, if that was the cadence, how long have we been in that key? If I have a cadence on G, have we just been monkeying around in G for half a week and we finally like put a ring on it and we had a cadence? Or was there some kind of goofy gray area where, you know, we're sort of in this key but not, and it can be interpreted different ways. So here I've color-coded all these tonalities and made all the determinations. So you see it's moving between several tonalities, okay? And then the next step is, now that I know the tonality of each area, I can figure out what the bass motion is. So let's say, aha, this area I'm in D minor. Well, now I need to put my D minor hat on, my D minor tinfoil hat, and think about this bass in D minor. How is it moving? Is it moving in a specific way that is a bass motion that I know? Or is it just moving in a generic rule of the octave way? And based on that information, I now know what the upper voices should do, what the harmonies should be. So now I can realize the Parlamento. And so here is the first few measures of the same Parlamento realized, and I'll play it for you. Maybe I'll play just the unadorned Parlamento first. Okay, so we just have... Weird. Okay, that doesn't necessarily evoke an obvious musical sound, I think, which is what I love about Parlamento, is that it actually does. If you know the rules, this has a specific musical thing it's getting at. Like, this is a Sudoku that there's a right answer. Okay? So here we go with the simplest realization where it's just chords. So that's the step of realization, is just to get the basic sound of the harmony, what's supposed to be going on. The next stage is stylization. And so I'm moving to a different Parlamento. This is by Fedele Fenaroli, who was a student of Durante and a very important teacher. And here's his Parlamento. Pause for reflection. recognize the cadences, recognizing the tonalities, and then providing the upper voice solutions, as we saw earlier, I can now stylize this. So this is just one stylization I came up with using a couple of different techniques. The first technique is figuration prelude. So here, I'm taking a chord and I'm just breaking it into a neat little pattern that sounds good on the keyboard. So, and by the way, that is entirely rule of the octave, that whole thing. There's really nothing else special about it. Then the next section seems fairly obviously to move to B flat major, but I'm going to use a different technique, that of compound melody, where I have one stream of notes that sort of weaves its way around the important chord tones and creates this nice sense of harmony. So it goes like this. Sorry, I can't see from here. Do it again. And now, highly stylized, using typical things from an allemande of the Baroque, but still following exactly the same bass motions and harmonies. So, and I'm getting all of that just from that information, okay? Because it's all inherent, it's all loaded in there if you know the algorithm to decode it. If you can recognize what is meant when the bass does this, like there are clues, okay? So that's essentially what's going on in the Partimento tradition. And there are thousands of these Partimenti that were used for training. I like to use Sforno because he goes in such a clear step-by-step fashion. There's a lot of work going on trying to figure out how they taught, because it was largely one-on-one, and so we don't always have records of what were they talking about. We do have even some examples of student Partimenti where they wrote out their own pieces. My friend Peter Van Tour from Norway is working on this. And it's quite fascinating. The only problem with the student stuff is you don't know what grade they got. So is this a good example that we should emulate, or is this like some idiot who was flunking out and this was the last thing before they kicked him out? So you kind of don't know. It's like learning to talk by imitating someone. You better pick someone who's good. So now there are further levels of complexity and interest in Partimento, and I'll show you that in just a second. But what you learn from this, the reason Partimento is so powerful for improvisation is because while you're doing it, you are working in several different areas of musicianship simultaneously. Obviously, you're just working on your keyboard skills and your reading skills. You are connecting specific compositional devices with your hearing. And so when these bass motions take place and you're putting suspensions on them, you do them enough times, you will know and hear them anywhere they happen. In a Mozart string quartet or Beethoven symphony or a Bach mass, you will instantly recognize it, and you'll have like aural skills superpowers. And people will be like, how can you hear that it's, the bass is doing that, and there's a suspension here, and then the upper voice is inverted, and then it modulated here. And you're like, because I played it 100 times. I know the song. It's kind of in my hands. You're also, this very important process of the complete piece is not spelled out for you note for note, and so you have to complete it. Okay, so you are literally making music rather than reciting music when you do Partimento. And that is the crucial difference that has led to the classical tradition not improvising today, is that our entire system of training is based on reciting something that's already done. Now, it's hard enough. You know, you want to play Paganini Etude, it's not a simple walk in the park. But you see how we can learn to obey all the notes exquisitely beautifully, but actually have almost no insight into how they came to be and how they could have been different. It could have been quite different. And still be good, and still be musical. And so that's basically the reason. So Parlamento, when you play it, you're completing music within the parameters of style, and so you learn to be a creator of music within the sound of the 18th century. So that's why it's so powerful. All right, let's look at one other thing in Parlamento that I think is cool, and that is its implications for stuff like invertible counterpoint. Can you imagine learning invertible counterpoint? That was always a scary term in school that they threatened us with. You know, we might make you learn invertible counterpoint. And I was always scared of it and felt stupid because I couldn't work it all out on paper. They didn't do it that way. Here's a bass motion. And this bass motion is known as Monte Romanesca. And it is the motion of up a fifth, up a fifth, up a fifth, up a fifth. Of course, we use dropping fourths so that it doesn't go out of range. And down to A is the same as up to A. And it goes that far. 3 pairs. And the correct harmonization of this is, if you just want to do it really simply, everything takes a chord of the fifth. There's just reposition triads. And then here you have a couple different options. Okay? We hear this all the time, even in like late Renaissance music. There's an Ave Verum, I know I've heard, that does exactly this. So we take it a step further, and now we suspend everything, which is cool. And if I do that, I end up in a distant key. Okay? So... So now it's starting to sound a little familiar, like maybe Mozart would do this. You've probably heard this, you know, and these would be, you know, the strings, the tremolo, or on the piano it would always be this. They use this stuff all the time. And in fact, there's a scholar named John Rice who suggests that this particular bass motion represented the sublime in the late Baroque and early Classical. And if you go through the Mozart concerti and look at the developments when he starts breaking a sweat, you know, he's not just like... not just being cute with his opening themes, he's actually like starting to talk about death and stuff. That's when this one will show up. It's in several of his concerti, and there's a few other motions he loves to use as well. But there it is, right at like this great spot where you go, man, Mozart's not just elegant; it's like dark sometimes. This is when he does it. Okay, so why is this important for invertible counterpoint? The reason is my first line. I have my voices situated this way. My second line, I took the soprano down an octave. So the upper voices can be traded, and they work. Okay, so already we have some invertible counterpoint. But now watch this. let's go to the top example. That's the middle voice. Here's the top voice. What do you notice about those? They're canon. They're exactly the same thing, time shifted and interval shifted. Okay? So it's actually one of these ultimate kind of counterpoint things where it's imitation and it's shifted in time and it's shifted by interval and they match and sound exactly, and you can trade them. Okay? Which is like this most sophisticated thing you can do in counterpoint. 12-year-old boys learn to do this and have it in their hands in every major and minor key. They all knew how to do this. They didn't have to discover it. They didn't have to stay up late and howl at the moon and like, oh, I just got inspired. They totally knew how to do this. And that's why Bach could write a cantata in 2 days. And, on Monday and Tuesday, and then on Wednesday send it to the copyist and rehearse it, play it Sunday. Next Monday and Tuesday write another one. It's why Haydn has 100 symphonies and Brahms has 2 or 4. Because they knew they had these techniques, right? And here's one more example of Parlamento and counterpoint. This is the same bass motion we talked about before. And here's a nice harmonization just in two voices above. So I have the chord of the 5th, and then I have the 6/5. Now if I want to, I can trade the places of the upper voices. I can take the soprano down an octave. And now I get this. And this, by the way, is a classic technique, is play the same thing twice and invert the voices to make it sound more cooler. So you're like, you get just to amp it up a little bit. It's identical, I just switched the places, okay? It's like having, I don't know, it's like having little hair things you can swap out. I'm going to have my tiara look, and now I'm going to have my girl next door look, or whatever. Is he videoing this? Anyway, so what they learned from this is all these basic tools of sophisticated counterpoint that now they don't have to sit and work out on paper with math. It's just in your hands. And they work in every key, and they work all the time. And so I used this one, the Monte Romanesca, I think in the first piece, I believe. I probably stuck it in there. I just use it whenever I want to, I don't know, bring a little sublime, just take it up a notch a little bit. So, okay, that's Parlamento in the most quick and horribly abbreviated way I've ever done in my life. Let's have a couple questions about Parlamento, and then we're going to do some ensemble improv, fun, goofy things, and make you all play and have some laughs. So are there any questions about the Parlamento tradition?
When did it start? Do you know?
Probably in the 1600s in Rome and Naples. The book you want to read, if you want to know about it, is The Art of Parlamento. At the end of this document, I have that listed as well as some other resources. Yes?
I know certainly when you play a Baroque melody that there was a elaborate, you alluded to this changes signifying sort of profundity or saying deep with the moment of this. There were a lot of Baroque figurations or ornaments were deliberately associated with certain like emotional things or things from Christian allegory. Was this true about harmonies also? Were certain sets of changes or sets of modulations that we heard them in music? Were composers trained to think of them as meaning certain things?
They never said so out loud. This is just us looking at when they use them, how often they use them, and kind of drawing our own conclusions. I feel just from playing them and using them, you almost have a relationship with them. Like, oh, this one, that's just my everyday thing that I just, rule the octave, blah, blah, blah. If I just want to keep the audience happy for a minute while I'm thinking, fine. And then other ones are special, like the nice dishes that I only get out for people I really like. And you kind of develop this weird relationship with these ideas. And so from that, just from my own experience, I think, why would they not? Because the feeling is so powerful when you use the special motions. I mean, it's so evocative. So, I feel like that. And some of them are so obvious. Some of the descending chromatic minor things that are associated with lament, Passacaglia and the chromatic lamentos and stuff, is pretty obvious. But no, I don't know that anyone ever said, and now, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to write sad music, here's what you use. Maybe they did, I just don't know about it. Great question. Any others about Parlamento? Yeah, cello guy.
Yes. So there's like of course the rules and the chords. But what about the rules on using rhythm on your improv? Are there limitations on that?
Well, rhythm is extremely flexible. And of course, harmonic rhythm is how fast the harmony is moving in relationship to just everything else that's going on. So usually I advise students find ways to extend your harmonies over longer periods of time. So take rule of the octave. If you just go chunk, chunk, chunk and play your way through, you've ascended the scale in 8 beats. But if you can figure out how to make every bass note last 2 measures, now you have 16 measures just ascending the scale. Another 16 going down. That's a 32-bar piece. That's your prelude right there. So that is done through various figurations that are appropriate to your instrument, that are stylistically appropriate. One of the things I encourage people to do is to keep a personal notebook of figurations and ideas that you just love. And I do it in pen by hand, because then I remember everything I write. I don't photo and copy and paste. I don't do anything digital. It's entirely pen and ink. And then I remember every single thing that's in it because I had to write it. So I have all my own personal figurations that are kind of all-purpose, and then I get bored with them and I go find new ones. And whenever I get myself in trouble by speeding up the harmonic rhythm too much, I kind of go, whoa, doggy, how about take a whole measure on the dominant and think, maybe take 2 measures on the dominant. Can you make it 4? So yeah, the rhythm is very flexible, but it has to be handled strategically. And it's kind of, as they say, it's a whole nother thing, right? Yeah.
I know that, so tuning changed. Like it's like, it used to be a lot lower, and now it's been tuned up to 440. How has that changed how has it sort of changed this kind of technique, or has it not really affected it at all?
I couldn't name a specific way it has, except that, some of the keys were nasty. And they either avoided them totally, or they used them for effect, and so that would affect the structure of where you would modulate, supposedly. I have never been able to transport myself historically to that time where you play the Moonlight Sonata in such and such tuning, and the creepiness of it comes through. To me, it just sounds like an old out-of-tune piano. So I have not been able to achieve that simpatico quality that supposedly is out there. I will tell you one story about historic tunings. I was at the Historic Performance Institute conference thingy at Indiana University, and saw these really smart musicology people. And they just like walk around and footnotes fall out of their pockets everywhere they go. It's incredible. And and I was just like this idiot piano player. Anyway, I was doing a session on some of this stuff, and they had a really nice harpsichord they got for me. It's a great harpsichord. And they have this tuner who knows everything about historic tunings, and he's like, which of the historic tunings would you like? And I'm like, oh man, now I gotta fake like I know what I'm talking about. Well, what is available? What's within your skill set? Well, I can do Valente 3. Ah, Valente 3. Yes, I believe I would like Valente 3 then. So he tunes in whatever this is. It just sounds like a tuned harpsichord to me. It sounds fine. And then he's in the room and I'm practicing and warming up. And one of the unisons goes out. So it's a little bit of a clangor. And here's Indiana University, Historic Performance Institute, professional tuner who did Valente 3 is in the room and he hears it and he's like, what are you going to do? And he didn't fix it. He's like, what are you going to do? And I thought, I think given the conditions and the weather and leaking roofs and probably they kept goats in the back of the hall or whatever, I just don't think the tuning thing was as clear as people make it out. I think everything was a little out of tune all the time. And so that you can hear 3 hertz difference in this special, slow movement of these 2 measures and everyone suddenly sees the face of God. I don't in that one moment when he's like, what are you going to do? That told me everything. So, I just love to play instruments that are in tune. Okay, great. Should we go on? Should we have a little fun? Do we have a cello quartet here? Do we have 4 cellists?
Yes.
I think it would be amazing if we got a cello quartet up here. Let's do it. Let's do it.
No pressure.
And does anyone have a decent sized tablet or laptop with this on it? Because I've got one that they can see, but I'm wondering, you do? Oh, that'd be so great. Thank you. It can be anything. Oh, please do. Yes. This is so great. You gotta make room for the boss. Okay? So, you guys make it, let's see, there's another chair. Quintet. I have my own cello quintet. Yeah. I am drunk with power. It's great. It's so great. So we're on tune? I would like Valente 3, please. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to try some basic types of improvisation that work with ensembles and that are historically rooted. That these are things people would do. And in fact, you can look this stuff up. There's an old book called The Division Viol, and it's about jamming on the grandfather of the cello. And so some of this stuff is taken from that, and some of it's taken from other resources. So the first thing we're going to do is just the easiest, dumbest thing ever, is we're going to improvise over this pendulum bass. And it's just 2 notes, and just a G and an A. So we need somebody who's a bass player. So who would want to be like a bass player? Who has like an emo attitude? Okay, that's you. Okay, so what we're gonna do, and we're gonna get this thing going, and you're just gonna repeat G and A, and we'll count it off so you'll know how long everything is. Yeah, that's all it is. That's your recital. And then we're gonna go through, and the others are going to figure out what goes with G and A, what harmonizes with G and A, and we're probably gonna find some nasty dissonances. And then we're going to find some things that sound good. So how about this tempo? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now find something that goes with that. What will match those notes? Yes. Right. And just play for a while. Just listen to what you get. What we've got going on actually is 2 chords of the 5th. Okay? We got a G major chord and an A minor chord. So this is rock and roll right here. And we can do that. You know, I love rock and roll. I love parallel fifths. Iron Man and stuff. And play that with parallel fifths. But let's go historical and not a parallel fifths. So over the A, what is available to us? What intervals are available to us? Yeah, we could do a 6th. And so let's keep it G major, and so it'll be an F sharp, okay? And let's just hear what sound we get if we do that. 2, 3, 4. And you can also keep a D running through both chords. Somebody just play a D all the way through. Bad. Now we need someone who's going to go in an upper register and who's going to invent a tune and just think about notes that match. Okay. And remember, stay in tempo. But move in faster note values. How about quarter notes? So he's going 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. The melody. Yes, just play long notes if you don't know what to do, but play out in a high register. D is always safe. You can just jam on a D like it's really meaningful. Play a high D. Way up. Yeah, way up there. More. Make a face. That's it. Now we're going to switch. One more measure of you. 1, 2. Now you're a melody guy. you know, people on the street, you can fool them. Just play in tune and make a good face, and everything will be fine. Okay, so that's just a pendulum bass and just some simple chords. So let's go to this next one here. I don't know why I wrote it in this key. Just a sense of evil. This is known as the Romanesca bass. It's also known as the Pachelbel bass. And the Romanesca is one of the oldest chord progressions there is. It goes back to the very, very beginning of where we have like functional triadic based harmony. And the way it works is, I forgot how it works. Let me look at it. Okay. I think let's figure this out by ear. Okay? This is known as the leaping Romanesca. There's also a stepwise Romanesca that we can do. We'll do this one. And we need a new bass player. You going to be a bass player? Okay, Professor is the bass player. And let's not do it in 100 flats. Let's just do it in A major. Okay, 3 sharps. Because you guys have open strings. Okay. No, and did I do it in 4/4?
3-2.
Oh, why did I do this stuff? Let's just stay in 4/4 in A major. So what we want to do is, without thinking about what necessarily goes with each bass note, we want to figure it out. Because I think our ear and our history will tell us we've played enough music and we know the sound of classical music. So let's just kind of pick our way through and find pitches that match while she plays. So let's go about 1, 2, 3, 4. And what we're going to do is take turns going all the way through, one at a time. And just see what you find, what sounds good and what sounds cracky. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 more measures. No, good play. And drop out. 2, 3, 4. That's a 4th. And your turn. Here we go. What does that sound like? Okay, and before we go, let's talk a second. What did you find were the sweet notes, the sweet intervals that really seemed to work?
Thirds usually.
Yeah, thirds. Thirds and especially tenths, which is just a third transposed an octave. Tenths are cooler than thirds. And the reason is that they just sound better because they're open space. Would you play a low C, your bottom string, and just play an E above that, a third above that? That's a cool sound, but now take that E up an octave. Yeah, you hear? It's boss. It's very full. So tenths just have this great quality. And tenths are almost always right in almost every situation because most harmonies contain a tenth. There's only a few every now and then that don't. So if you don't know what to do, play a tenth, and you'll probably be right. Okay? The other note that is very, very often right is scale degree 5. Okay, so in this case E, Not in every situation, but again, most harmonies either will contain it, or you play it and you'll be like, that sounds like a suspension, so I should resolve it, or it sounds like a cool color tone. So most of the time will be right. There's fiddle players I worked with. We had a traditional Irish band, and we play all this stuff, and they were just starting to learn to improvise. And I would tell them, guys, if you don't know what to do, just play a really, really beautiful scale degree 5 floating above everybody. That's like half of all pop music. Every string synth patch is just like scale degree 5, really high. Okay, now what let's do is let's change the bass line. And let's make it just stepwise. We're going to go all the way down the scale. Okay, so just an A major scale. Just an A major scale. Oh yeah. They lost their screen for a moment. And one measure for each note. And the way we're going to harmonize the A major scale, this is a similar technique. It's known as the stepwise Romanesca. The first note takes a chord of the 5th. And then the next note takes a chord of the 6th. Chord of the 5th. Chord of the 6th. Chord of the 5th. Chord of the 6th. Chord of the 5th. You end up on the wrong thing. Okay? So at the end you have to like custom make a thing because it doesn't work out right. Okay? So chord of the 5th. How did I do that before? What voice? Yeah, I did it like this. It works all the way down to scale degree 3. Now on scale degree 2, you throw in the notes that fit with the dominant. What are the notes that will go with the dominant? Do you know? Yeah. And you could even do a D, okay? And then on the bottom note, everything's home, okay? So let's try this in pairs and just see what in the world happens, okay? So we'll go the other direction. So you can do, the thing that's always going to be safe is tenths. Because every single one of those chords all the way down contains a tenth. Okay? So if you don't know what to do, you play tenths and you do this vibrato and you like shake your head, you're like, oh man. And it's like half my career is faces. Sorry? We're still doing A major. But you can also look around for the other harmonies if you want to try them. And if you're a little bit bored, like with that tenth, you know, there's a thing called diminution. And diminution is where you're using a long note, and that's still kind of like the structural note, but you're going to like decorate around it. So if we're chasing A down in tenths, like this, I could do something to that C sharp without really leaving it. Like, what could I do to it? Yeah, well, like a turn around it. Do you hear how I'm not really leaving the note at all? Or how about... That's all those are, is there tenths with diminutions. That's what Pachelbel is. Okay, so... Or if you're really aggressive... You could even play an entire scale, and it will sound. So let's just see what he comes up with. We'll go through each of the dudes, and then we'll maybe put it all together in a big noise. Okay, so A major. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just him. 2, 3, 4. Okay, that doesn't sound right. What are you playing? Yeah, and what is she playing? No, she's in A major doing a descending scale, so what's she playing?
Oh, I wasn't doing that.
Okay.
Sorry, descending.
Okay, let's descend. Let us descend. Ascending is a different rule. Very different rule. Okay. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now that's a fourth. Let's start again. Let's find the tenths. Let's find the tenths up there. Do you know where to start?
That's like C sharp.
It's like C sharp. Yeah. 2, 3, 4. There it is. But that's a tritone. That's a tritone. And tritones are like love potion. Yeah, exactly. Well, tritones are love potion. They're very powerful, but don't misuse it. You might match up the wrong, things that don't go together. Okay, so let's just do tenths, and let's just hear the tenths. 2, 3, 4. Oh, beautiful. Now just follow her in tenths. Yes. Watch when her bow is going to move. Yeah, all the way down. It's gorgeous. You could play a wedding like this. Now let's do the same thing, but every time you play, let's go. Ya, da, da, da. Okay, from the beginning. Just a little turn. Yeah, one of those things. That has a name. It's called a Geschwindigkeit. I don't know. It's another important career skill is making up fake foreign terms. It's really important. And not being caught by musicologists in the footnotes. 2, 3, 4. Isn't that great? Okay, what should we do now? We should add another cello. And what we need is, remember that these are chords of the fifth and chords of the sixth. Okay? And so on the first one, that's going to take a fifth, so it'll be an E. And then the next one, the bass drops to G. So what's the sixth above that?
E.
So you can just sit there on E. Okay? Now the bass is going to drop again and take a fifth. So where's that?
C sharp.
So can you track that? And while he's doing his ya-dee-da-da, and she's going down the bass. So we have this trio here. Here we go. 2, 3.
Can I also like embellish this?
No.
Oh.
You can't. 2, 3, 4. Either one. You can take it off if you want. Now let's think about that, because you started up high and above him, and then you got inside the texture, and actually that voice will work in either place. So let's play through twice, and you start low underneath him. We'll play all the way through, and then you transpose and do it exactly the same up an octave, and let's just find out what happens. 2, 3, 4. And you know what would be cool? If you stayed on the A, all the way at the end, and hold it and suspend it until almost the end. Let's find out what happens if we do that. 2, 3. And you're still doing the fifth and sixth, but at the end when you get to that A, you stay there and suspend it. Yeah, we're making the whole thing up. 2, 3, 4. Stay on it and resolve down. going to be.
Yeah.
Next time you nail it. Okay?
Of course.
Yeah, okay.
It's obvious.
So that's an example of what I was talking about in Parlamento, where very often the upper voices are invertible. You can trade places, and now you get more music and different effect, and it's like a same thing but cooler. It's a standard thing. So these two guys are sad because they haven't been able to play. So let's give them some sad music. We're going to go to the Passacaglia here, okay? Passacaglia bass. We'll choose a key here. It doesn't have to be this key. Passacaglia is 4 descending steps from 1 down to 5. And the harmony that it takes, 1 takes a chord of the 5th. 7, it's flat 7, of course. Takes chord of the 6th. We go down to 6, and it takes chord of the 6th. And 5 takes a major. Okay? But there's something you almost always do in this, and here's what it is. Okay? So that's that middle voice. I'm starting on the 5th. I keep it. If I keep it here, it becomes dissonant. You hear it? Ouch, 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 please drop. Thank you. Now you may go back up. And that's invertible. Alright, and I can start filling in more voices. If somebody wants to try to suspend that chord, you can do that too. I'm just curious what would happen if we all jumped in on this together. What if we did it in F minor? Yeah, you know, because I'm thinking that low open string for the dominant would be so dark and bodacious. So let's give Professor a break. And you want to be our bass?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So you're F down to C. Let me just hear it. Down an octave. That's it. Yes, that's also the bass line of the lead solo section of Stairway to Heaven. Don't mind as you wind on down the road. Yeah. So now, is everybody sort of clear on the other stuff we're going to do? You know what? We learn by playing. Let's not do paperwork. Let's not have a lecture. Let's just play music. All right. So we're going to start. He's going to play this thing once. Yeah. And then I'm going to bring you in one at a time. Yeah. It's you. Come on in. There it is. Those are parallel fifths. Do you hear it? Okay. So if you start on scale degree 5, that was all parallel fifths, by the way. That was very rock and roll. I congratulate you. If you start on scale degree 5, the first chord is a chord of the 5th. The second chord is a chord of the 6th, so you'd stay there. Okay, otherwise, ka-chunk, ka-chunk, now you're moving in 5th. By the way, parallels. The reason that historic music is so freaked out about parallels, does anybody actually know why? Because we do them in rock and roll and we love them. Dun, 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 and they sound great. Why don't we do them in this style of music? Has anybody ever told you this? No, it's not it at all.
It's old school.
That's not the reason. There's a reason. The reason is when you move in thirds and sixths and tenths, you hear the individuality of the notes. They stay separate. But when you go in parallel octaves, they become the same thing. Okay? So could you two guys play Three Blind Mice in D major together in octaves? 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. And one of you go up an octave. Here we go. Ready? Yeah. That's hot cross buns. Okay, here we go. Just go ahead and play. Yes, like that. Just play it a couple times. Yeah. You hear it? You hear that those octaves, we perceive that as a single line. Okay? And fifths basically do the same thing. They're so similar that we perceive it as a single sound, and so we lose the sense of polyphony and independence of line, which is the core value of Baroque music. It's the core value is polyphony, independence of line, his beautiful choreography of this voice is going off this way, and this voice is doing this, and this voice is over here. And somehow all this beautiful motion comes together and sounds great. So when they lock together like the Rockettes, well, that's a cool effect, but it's not independence, okay? I've not actually been to the Rockettes. Just point of clarification. Okay, so anyway, Passacaglia, bass, here we go. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're in next. 2, 3, 4. Nice. Now stay on the C sharp. Do you hear that dissonance right there? Okay, here's the rule for dissonance. Dissonance is love potion in Baroque music. You can have it, but you better handle it correctly. Okay, you can't just like pour it on your Wheaties in the morning. Okay, it has to be treated correctly. And the way it's treated is it's prepared by common tone and resolved by step. So it has to be, that note has to be there first, and that's your fifth. Go ahead and play your fifth, F sharp or F and C. Yeah, just play that. That's consonant. Okay? Now drop. That's consonant. That's a sixth. Now drop. Ah, you hear it? Now you have to, while he stays there, drop a step. Oh, thank you. And now, yeah. No, come up to the C. Yeah. Now do all those together that we just did. Yes, consonant. Consonant. No, stay on C. Dissonant. No, play C. Now resolve it down. Yeah, not you. But anyway, you guys understand. You guys understand. So, and if you don't follow these picky rules, your music won't sound like it's from them. Okay? One little mistake of voice leading will transport your music into a different era. Maybe a cool era, but maybe not the one you meant. So, if, for example, I play unprepared dissonant sevenths, well-timed clavier. What happened there was I was playing unprepared sevenths that are accepted in the language of the blues. And yet I was trying to play with a figuration that it's typical of Bach. And it's goofy, it makes everybody laugh, okay? And if you want to make everybody laugh, definitely go for it. But if you want to have this sound that sounds like it's from that style, you actually have to obey it. So now I got that figured out. Let's just try the whole thing with everybody in, with the bass, and let's just see what happens. 2, 3, 4. I'm going to play along. Keep you honest. Now, the thing I love about this exercise is that you learn intuitively what works. You're learning your voice leading almost like on a feelings basis. Like, ew, that sounded terrible. I'll never do that again. Oh, that was cool. I'm going to do that again. I think it's more powerful than getting an A on a piece of paper. I think it sticks with you better if you just jam a little bit. Okay, let's try it. We got time for another one. Let's see what we got here. We have the Handel Chacon. We need to do circle of fifths, though. We're going to do C5. So scroll down if you can see that. Again, I put it in an idiot key. I don't know why. I put it in. I don't know why. I don't know. I was probably angry with someone that day. I was trying to punish somebody. So let's do this in. What key do you guys want to do this in? First of all, major or minor?
Major.
You want to do a major? Okay. And what key? A nice cello key. Do you want to do E flat? I like the attitude. Okay, E flat. So the way that C5 works is that the bass usually will go up a fourth, down a fifth to stay within range, because if you just drop fifths, you drop off the end of your cello pretty fast. Okay. So that pattern is what we see here. And there are 7 notes in the scale, and so it takes 7 measures to go all the way around. And the bass notes are 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Okay? So every one of those notes can take a chord of the fifth, a triad, if you want to be boring, which we will. Okay? The thing we want to avoid is following the bass exactly in fifths or octaves. So the bass is going to go like this. So what I would not want to do, even though these would be notes in the chord, is go. Where am I? I got lost. Fifths. Yes. I can do music. Okay, that would be entirely parallel fifths, and you hear the nasty of that. Okay, can I follow in tenths? I wonder. Isn't there a piece that goes like that? Isn't that Beethoven? Yeah, so you can follow in tenths. That sounds really, really great. Can we, what if I just tried to find something stepwise? Yeah, there's some stepwise stuff in there. So there are different pathways through this if all we're doing is playing major or just triads, whatever triad the scale gives us, one of which is going to be diminished. Okay, so 3 flats, don't play A natural, only play 3 flats. And shall we have the professor again do the circle? So one time around, and then we'll all jump in and just see what we get. And just repeat the E flat. We're all in now. If you are doing something ugly, move. Stop. Okay. So what do we need to know? What do we need to know? What did we not know that gave us that stuff?
Perhaps maybe the pattern of up 4 and down 5.
Yeah. I think you didn't know what bass note you were over.
Yeah.
I think you were just randomly looking for stuff, which is okay, but you need to think, where is the bass, okay? So put one ear on her while you're playing and find something that matches, okay? So let's just do a trio right now, Let's see what happens. U3, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to do another trio. You guys. Yes, find somewhere else to go. There we go. Good. So that's possible. It would take a few more times to really work it out. But let me show you a cooler voice leading pattern that is more typical of the 18th century. Because this all chords of the fifth is just a little bit vanilla, you know. And here's what they would actually do. They would learn this in 3 voices, okay? And so I have this, and then the other 2 voices need to be 5 and 3, or 3 and 5, either one, okay? So from here, the bass moves. Isn't that great? And what's happening in the upper voices, one of them is moving at a time, and one of them is not moving. So we're going to do this in trios, and we're going to let you figure it out. So we'll start on E flat, and we'll give us a G, and give us a B flat above his G. So let me hear that chord. Okay, then when she moves to A flat, keep the G, and move the B flat to a C. Can you go up an octave? Yeah, now go back to the original chord, just play G. Up an octave, I think. There we go. Stay there, you guys move. Stay there, you guys move. Yeah, you should be on F. Stay there, you guys move. You should be a tenth above her. Yeah. Let me show you again. It's going to sound like this. So once we start, you move every other time she moves, and you move down. Okay? We're going to get it. So E flat, please. And G, up an octave. B flat above him. And you'll move first. So you two move. Now you two move. Yes. Now you two move. No, you move down a step every time. Let's do it again. Down a step every time in the scale.
Except for the first time.
No, except the first time, yeah. Okay, again, first chord. More sound. Second chord. You two move. You two move. With her, of course. You two move. You two move. Yes. Now you two move. And resolve to E flat. Yeah. Trade places. Okay, so you're the G, you're the B flat. So you move up first. Okay? Here we go. First chord. Move. going to play a game, and every time it's your time not to move, you don't move. And every time it's, these are the rules. When it's time to move, instead of just going la, la, you go la, da, da, da. You do the upper note and then down, okay? Let's find out. E flat, G, B flat, sound. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, da, 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 da. Yes. Yeah, okay. Now, here's what's also cool about this when you're playing alone, is that these two voices can be linked together okay, so for example in this fugue I did, there it is. Okay, it's that voice leading contained within a single line. So I know if I'm playing that, I can do all these. I know I can do that, or I can do. Where was I? Yeah. I can do all the different voice leading patterns that fit that. So let's try with the other guys. You follow everything that we were just doing? Okay, so you're the G and you're the B flat. And let's try right away with this game where we move with the 2 extra notes, okay? So, yes, every time you move. When you don't move, then you don't move, all right? I know. It's like playing Settlers of Catan. Okay, so first chord, here it is, E flat major. And to the next chord. You move from G to A flat right there. Stay on G. So between the first 2 chords, you don't move. You're becoming the dissonance.
Oh, okay.
Because she's on A flat, right? You're on G, he's on C. Think about that. It is. Yeah, so that G, now it's dissonant. What does it have to do on the next chord? Has to fall. So we're just going to fall in a really kind of like stylish way. Not da, da, we're going to go da. Okay? Like fainting for drama. Okay? So this game is called drama fainting. All right. So E flat major chord, please. And going on. 1, 2, 3, da, da, da. Yeah, I need you to move 1 measure earlier. Okay, let's do it one more time. I'll try to conduct better. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Stay there. Now it's your turn. Your turn. It's your turn. And dominant chord. And now do it without me. Here we go. 2, 3, 4. Starting on the first chord. 2, 3, 4. There it is. Everybody, let's just try it. Keep that bass going and make up whatever you want. jam session is worth about 10 times the same amount of time spent on paperwork. Because you just get your ears developed, you know, you're getting it in your hands, you're hearing other people, and you're just getting this kind of intuitive sense of where you ought to be. Particularly these exercises with resolving dissonances. Handling dissonances is, you know, it's kind of a huge job in improvising, because they all have to be correct. There's a lot of other stuff you can do. It's very, very free. It doesn't matter what you do, but dissonances, you got to handle it correctly. So are there any other questions as we wrap up? I've made these folks work really hard, and just want to address any last. We've got, these are just some resources here. My website is there. The book is coming out. It's on pre-order, I understand, at Oxford and Amazon all over the world. Patreon, the Improv Planet is an online school of historic improv. And then these are some books that I think are worthwhile. So thank you all for your good company. Thanks for your time.